Coming up on The Big Story, top tips on how to get a job in a Covid-19 world.
Big election takeaway, why GRCs are no longer safe havens for the PAP.
And the United States reports a record number of new coronavirus cases.
Good evening, you're watching The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Olivia Quay.
And I'm Haryanto Diman. Now you can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode.
We begin with the latest COVID-19 figures. The Health Ministry confirmed 327 new cases today. Of these, 9 are community cases, comprising 6 Singaporeans or permanent residents and 3 work pass holders.
There are also 3 imported cases in today's count. Migrant workers living in dormitories form the vast majority of the remaining cases. There are now over 47,400 cases in Singapore. More details will be released later.
The pandemic has hit the economy hard, forcing many companies into survival mode. Just this week, Resorts World Sentosa announced that it's slashing jobs in what is the first mass retrenchment exercise in Singapore since the crisis began.
The Straits Times understands that 2,000 people will let go at RWS. Now, industry analysts now say it's a matter of time before Marina Bay Sands will likely have to lay off some staff. Now, let's discuss this further with Alvin Goh, Executive Director at the Singapore Human Resources Institute. Hi, Alvin. Thank you for coming on to join us. Now, in this uncertain economic climate, do you expect to see more large-scale layoffs in the coming weeks? And if so, which sectors are most at risk?
Right. If economic activity does not pick up anytime, especially in the next quarter or two, I believe strongly that we will see large retrenchments and layoffs happening, and especially to the entertainment industry, the art scene, and also the service industry as well. We could possibly see large outflows of staff itself.
Well, another two-part question for you, Alvin. What practical advice do you have for job seekers and those who are worried about losing their jobs? And what can they do to improve their jobs prospects then?
I think especially in the COVID world right now, the need for actually social networking, be it on LinkedIn or any other social media itself, that's where I think job seekers should actually be. That would be a good hunting ground for them in terms of looking out for potential opportunities, networking, and finding out who are the key decision makers itself. And also, the importance of continuous learning is also very important. Just because that you are being laid off, I don't think it's a good excuse of not doing anything right now. I think it's important to continuously to look at relearning and reskilling oneself to get ready for the economic picked up. Perhaps, maybe, hopefully, in the 4th quarter of this year, or perhaps maybe in the next 2021 itself. I think it's important to keep going, keeping that mental positive mindset to keep going. I think that's very key.
Right. So that's on the part of the employee. Now let's talk about on the employer front. As companies adapt to an increasingly digital economy, what kinds of roles are going to be most in demand?
If I look at a broad scope of positions out there, especially towards the digital economy, I think a key area of emphasis would be people with the necessary skill sets of understanding business and able to actually look at data itself, especially in the digital economy, to be able to harvest data and use it as a key strategic decision-making point. All right, I think we have to move away from just past business experiences, using our common sense in the past, because we live in a COVID and most likely in a post-COVID world, right? And transformations are taking place it's so aggressively taking place right now. I think we lack this platform of people who's able to understand what business is and take those business data and make it into a good and viable, sustainable strategy. I think this is something that the workforce transformations from various agencies are actually looking into it right now.
Well, thank you so much, Alvin, for the tips and advice. We've been speaking with Alvin Goh, who's the Executive Director at the Singapore Human Resources Institute. In other local news, the number of international visitors to Singapore fell sharply in the first quarter as the Covid-19 outbreak spread worldwide. From 1.69 million arrivals in January, the number fell to 733,000 in February and 240,000 in March. Figures from the Singapore Tourism Board also showed tourism receipts plummeting across accommodation, shopping and F&B spending.
Singapore researchers have discovered antibodies that can neutralize the coronavirus in a Covid-19 patient. The antibodies prevent the virus from either hijacking a human cell or replicating inside of it. These findings by scientists from the National Centre for Infectious Diseases and A*STAR could pave the way for better diagnostics, like identifying people who recover from the infection without symptoms or leading to improved treatment for patients. It could also guide the development of a vaccine or validate the effectiveness of one. However, the researchers caution that a lot more work is needed. For instance, one big unknown is how the antibodies would persist in a recovered patient.
Two Singapore Civil Defence Force officers who had claimed trial over a ragging incident that took the life of a full-time national serviceman are now facing less serious charges. Kenneth Chong Chibun and Nazan Muhammad Nazi were each charged today with one count of performing a negligent act by failing to prevent their subordinates from carrying out the ragging activity on May 13, 2018. The two men were originally charged with intentionally aiding a group of SCDF servicemen to cause grievous hurt to Corporal Kok Yen Chin via rash act and endangering human life. In delivering his reasons for amending the charge, the judge noted that both were not present at the well where the incident took place.
Singapore's non-oil domestic exports jumped 16.1% last month from June 2019, putting Nodex back on track after a drop in May. The main export drivers were electronics, specialized machinery and pharmaceuticals, and the top three export markets were Japan, South Korea and Taiwan. June's export performance easily beats analysts' forecasts of about 7%. Are GRCs still impenetrable fortresses for the People's Action Party? Well, that's something opposition veteran Chiam See Tong once said, and it's what we're analysing today, a week post-GE2020.
Wins for the opposition in Aljunied and Sengkang, plus close fights in East Coast and West Coast. Those results appear to dispel Mr. Chiam's impression.
And sharing more on this is political correspondent Linette Lai. Welcome, Linette. Now, political experts that you spoke to said having a minister helming a GRC doesn't magically make it invincible. East Coast, West Coast and Sengkang proved this to be true. But what about GRCs like Jurong, Ang Mo Kio and Pasir Ris Punggol? Does this theory still hold weight in those instances?
So I think you've got to look at two things. Firstly, it depends on the opposition there. So in Jurong, you had Red Dot United, which was officially formed, I think, about a month before polling day. In Ang Mo Kio, you have the Reform Party. It's contested the past three elections in Ang Mo Kio, but it's not considered one of the bigger parties. Certainly, it doesn't have the most mind share. And in Pasir Ris Punggol, again, you have a three-corner fight, and it's between two smaller parties and the PAP. So, you don't expect the kind of close margins you had in East Coast and West Coast, especially when another thing you have to look at is the minister contesting. So in Jurong, Ang Mo Kio, Pasir Ris Punggol, that's Senior Minister Staman, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, and Senior Minister Teo Chee Hean. And these are, the most senior members of the cabinet and probably the most well-known. Whereas in East Coast and Sengkang especially, the ministers were new. Deputy Prime Minister Heng Swee Keat moved over from Tampines, and Mr. Ng Chee Meng also moved over from a different GRC. They had less time on the ground, and they've also had less time in politics in general. So with that combination, you have quite a strong Oppo team in the East Coast and West Coast, plus a minister who hasn't had so much time in politics, and therefore that explains your narrower wins.
Now, for the opposition, a long-standing challenge has been attracting enough good candidates. That didn't seem to be the case for GE2020. But has the definition of a good candidate changed? And moving forward, will we see more evenly matched candidates from both sides?
So I think at the core of it, a good candidate, right, is someone who can bring in the votes, and that means someone who can deliver what voters want. So in that sense, I don't think that has changed, but what has changed is what voters want. So in the past, you saw a lot of focus placed on academic qualifications. The PAP would say, look, these are the people who are going to lead the country, and people voted for them. And now we're trying to steer away from that notion that grades are everything. We've gone beyond that. So, in the PAP's lineup this time, you had people who perhaps didn't do so well in the formal school system, but at the end of the day, they're still successes in their own right. So we've gone beyond just academics. And people want diversity in background of the candidates, but they also want diversity in terms of the kind of voices in parliament. They don't want everyone there to be just from one party. And, they want people who make meaningful contributions to parliament who are not from the PAP. And as for evenly matched, I think certainly because there used to be a certain stigma over joining opposition parties, but it's eroding very quickly as you see. They've managed to get very good candidates this round, and people are starting to see that opposition parties can be a very constructive force for Singapore politics.
Right. Well, Linette, figures show that PAP's vote share in 5-member GRCs was almost 11 points lower than in SMC. So looking ahead to the next GE, what's the possibility of a revival of 3-member GRCs?
Well, I think it's not very likely. To me, the sweet spot for the PAP seems to be 4 or maybe 5-member GRCs, because so on one hand, the smaller GRCs mean that you can cut your losses, but it also means that the opposition has to find a smaller good team to contest that GRC. So they do have a higher chance of winning. And with smaller GRCs, you would naturally have more constituencies because GRCs have a certain population limit. So even though right now you have the PAP having perhaps quite narrow wins in certain GRCs, but with 3-man GRCs, they might end up losing more constituencies altogether. So the way I see it, the benefits are quite limited, and unless the PAP is very confident of winning, I don't think we will see 3-man GRCs anytime soon.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your insights, Linette. We've been speaking to Linette Lai, political correspondent at the Straits Times.
Don't miss an Insight special on GE2020 in the Sunday Times paper this weekend. There'll be in-depth analysis of the results, the key issues, including why the 10 million population issue just won't go away, and the best pictures from past elections and how the Straits Times covered them.
Good evening, I'm Dylan Ang. Here are the international headlines. The United States reported more than 77,000 new coronavirus cases on Thursday, shattering its daily record. The number of deaths in a 24-hour period has neared 1,000. The loss of 969 lives was the biggest increase since June 10, with Florida, South Carolina and Texas all reporting their biggest one-day spikes. The US State Department said foreign students coming from Europe are exempt from a travel ban the United States imposed because of the coronavirus pandemic. President Donald Trump banned travelers from most European countries in March as COVID-19 cases soared in the region. This was before the disease took hold in the US. A British woman who joined ISIS as a teenager has been allowed to return to Britain to appeal the government's decision to strip her of her British citizenship. The Court of Appeal ruled in Ms. Shamima Begum's favour on Thursday. Now 20, she was one of 3 schoolgirls who left London to join the Islamic State group in Syria in 2015 and later married a member of the terrorist group. Her citizenship was revoked by the Home Office on security grounds after she was found in a refugee camp in 2019. Real Madrid were crowned La Liga champions for the 34th time today after Karim Benzema scored twice in a 2-1 victory over Villarreal. The win saw Madrid move 7 points clear with 1 game to spare, ending Barcelona's 2-year hold on the trophy. Real coach Zinedine Zidane said his side's title win tastes sweeter than any of the 3 Champions League crowns he has led them to. And those were the global updates. It's back to you guys in the studio.
You know, Olivia, for the past few weeks, we've talked to local writers and artists involved in the 30 Days of Art with NEC series. Now, this series, commissioned by the Straits Times, was done to inspire and uplift readers in this new COVID-19 reality with the support of the National Arts Council.
Well, in this final installment of this series, we take a look at homegrown company Lariata and its repackaging of a Kopi for One, Laksa Cantata and window shopping into a trio of short films. Before the show, I spoke to two people involved in the project, but first, here's a sneak peek of a Singapore trilogy.
Laksa, a whiff of the velvety gravy makes my knees tremble with delight. Its tantalizing taste makes me drool. The concoction caresses my senses.
Time to shop, time to buy myself a new wardrobe. Time to shop, time to buy myself some new heels, new shoes. Finally, I get the chance to browse here. It's a shopping adventure about to...
Joining me now to talk more about this project are Lariata's co-founder and artistic director Akiko Otawa, as well as theatre veteran Nora Samosir. Akiko, let's start with you. Could you tell us more about how a Singapore trilogy came about?
Sure. Actually, this suite comes from a bigger work, a Singapore trilogy, which we premiered in 2018. In it, Kopi for One, which is the one that I am in, was commissioned and developed over, 2 years of time. And when we were approached by Straits Times, we needed to present a uniquely Singaporean story, but in a bite-sized format, true to our mission. So to produce operas that are in English, bite-sized and relevant. So after our super team was assembled, with the immense help, of course, from Nora, we were able to reimagine these three characters so that they would be stuck at home during this pandemic, singing about what they want to do when all of this is over.
Well, that's great to hear. Now, Nora,
Yes.
you've had years of experience in theatre, you've seen it all, but what are some of the challenges
I wouldn't say seen it all.
What were some of the challenges that you had to face, putting all of this together under of course, the very unique COVID-19 circumstances?
Oh yeah, I think the COVID-19 was interesting because it imposed restrictions that then we had to be creative about, right? So we initially it was, maybe you can record it in the studio, black box studio at the Goodman Arts Center. But then we decided, now that's kind of like, what's the point really if we're just standing there in an empty box and just singing, right? So we had sound engineers and videographers who were up to the challenge to do like a music video. So we had to come up with a scenario of what the music video story is about, which is not necessarily what the original operas from which these three arias were taken were about, but still related. So we found that actually worked very well with the COVID-19 situation of being stuck at home. Just going around the limit, I think the limit of the 5 people in any space, in that particular space. We were able to cover that because we only chose arias to record, in other words, one singer, and then it was pre-recorded, so we didn't even need the musician to be in the same space, so that cut down the number of people that needed to be in the space. But nonetheless, we had to use a video and audio recording with very skeletal crew, but they rose to the challenge again. All our collaborators, the people on the technical side were creative, were artists in their own rights, and they were able to work with the restrictions that were imposed by COVID-19 to come up with, I think, a rather beautiful piece of music video.
Since the original work in 2018 and then now, doing this again in 2020, did the message that you hope to put across your audience change, or was the crux of it still relatively the same?
Every single person is affected by this pandemic, in different ways. And when we're feeling down, it's easy to feel isolated and alone. And we want to let our audience know that you are not alone, and your experience and emotions are valid, whether you're feeling, whatever you're feeling right now. And as human beings, just like we're having this interview now over the internet, this desire to connect is innate, right? And we hope that this show acts as a conversation starter, which is what we have always hoped for audiences with their loved ones about how they're feeling and how they can help one another. And I think one of the greatest things that Ruben Lai, my co-founder, has said is hope is the great fuel that drives us to continue forward. And art is the process of being human. I thought that was so beautifully put together that I have to share that with you.
Right, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And what a fantastic way to end this interview. Akiko, Nora, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Go to the Straits Times website to watch Larietta, a Singapore trilogy, and the other works in the 30 Days of Art with NAC series.
I'm excited to watch the series after that interview.
I know, we have interviewed so many people, but we can always look back and see their performance in full or their projects in full.
Definitely. Now, before we go with something special coming up this weekend, now jazz maestro Jeremy Montero is celebrating his 60th birthday, and to mark this occasion, he will be holding an online concert which you can catch on ST's Facebook and YouTube pages.
Hi everyone. Please join me on my live stream show this Sunday, together with wonderful performers Randy Brecker, Wynton Marsalis, Laura Fiji. The show is entitled Jeremy Montero at 60, Celebrating a Life in Music. Some great regional artists as well, like Eugene Pao and Michael Verpen, and our very own Nathan Hatono, Melissa Tam, Ella Mae Fernandez, and the godfather of Singapore jazz, Luis Soliano. The show is at 8 p.m., 19 July, this coming Sunday. Our media partner is the Straits Times, and they will be streaming the show on all their channels. Hope to see you there.
Well, of course, a happy birthday in advance to Jeremy Montero, and you can watch more news and videos at straitstimes.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as well by hitting the red button below.
Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Kui, of course. Thanks for watching and have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.